Let's get to this breaking development. Hamas hasn't necessarily confirmed that this is true. The Israeli Defense Forces, what some call the Israeli Occupation Forces, have supposedly verified that Yayha Sinwar, the top leader of Hamas, has been killed. The narrative is that he was killed while he was fighting actually alongside other resistance forces in Rafah. So I wanted to ask you, Colonel, because this is a strategy, or perhaps we can call it more of a policy of Israel, of decapitation. There's been, of course, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah's assassination, numerous attempts to assassinate more Hezbollah leaders, including political leaders. And now we have Yayha Sinwar as the latest of these victims. But I wanted to ask you about this policy and what it says about where Israel really is, because on the one hand, you have Israel conducting these assassinations, and on the other, you have them also taking revenge out on civilians, but having trouble achieving stated goals. What do you make of this, and how do you see these assassinations in the broader context of what's happening in West Asia and what Israel and the United States backing it is doing?
Let me throw a little history out, if you don't mind. I won't be too long on it. The last time the United States did anything of this nature was the assassination of Admiral Yamamoto in World War II, the architect and indeed probably the genius behind the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor that brought the United States into World War II. There was a lot of talk. I'd be surprised because it was after that attack had occurred, and the United States was fighting mad, furious, in a rage. There was still a lot of discussion about whether or not it was right, morally, ethically, rules of war, such as they were at that time, to assassinate a uniform-wearing, general in the enemy's camp. We did it. P-38 Lightnings intercepted his plane going to the Philippines, as I recall, shot it down and killed him. We didn't do any more. We contemplated doing others, including Hitler himself and some of his stooges, but we didn't do any more. And I think it's because that very discussion and the argument surrounding it really soured people on doing that sort of thing, not least of which is self-interest. Your enemy will do it back to you. And incidentally, that's what really worried me about when Donald Trump, president at the time, took out the leader and a member of the Iranian government, a recognized by the UN state government of the IRGC. But he was also a member of the Iranian government. We assassinated him under some really dubious circumstances, too. He was actually on what could be called a sort of a peace mission. And he was in Iraq, to boot. And we assassinated him and assassinated the leader of one of the militias in Iraq, too, that we didn't like. This is not a good thing. Basic point. This is not a good thing to do. And Israel has made a trade of it. That's what they do. They take out the heads of whomever they don't like. And I'm sure that they have taken some heads out that we didn't like either, and they've done it in secret. It's no different from what we accused Vladimir Putin of doing, for example, with his nuclear pellet or whatever, with the guy he didn't like who was in London at the time. This is not a good practice for states, especially big states that say they believe in international humanitarian law and international law in general, including international criminal law, to be doing. It's very damaging. And Israel is the most damaging state on the face of the earth. Now, I hasten to add, they're doing so many other things that are bona fide war crimes and just unnatural almost. I watched a video the other day of a young man burning to death in a tent. He was on an IV drip and he was burning to death, and you could see the IV drip on his arm. And he's burning to death. The Israelis have made a habit of attacking tents now because it kills a lot of people. Tent gets on fire and everybody in there is dead. So it's not something that, and here's the other thing about it. As a military professional, I don't think it works. It causes anger in the other camp, or camps in this case. It causes another person to be placed in charge because nobody in this kind of struggle is without a second and a third and a fourth and very good procedures for putting them in place, just like we have for our president. After 9/11, we went down to number 33 practicing. We went through the whole list from the vice president to the Speaker of the House to the Secretary of State. I had to perform for the Secretary of State because Colin Powell didn't want to participate. It was too wasteful of his time. But nonetheless, we went down the whole list all the way to 33, practicing what we do if we lost leadership. That's time consuming and very expensive. This is not something states should be engaging in, assassinating one another's leaders for whatever reason. There just isn't a reason, really. It doesn't improve the tactical, operational, or strategic situation. It often makes it worse. For example, when we got rid of bin Laden, Zawahiri was more bloodthirsty and probably smarter than bin Laden, operationally speaking. You put somebody else in, that's what you do. And you got a big newspaper headline for about 5 minutes, and that's about it. And Netanyahu, as I said, has made a practice of this. It's almost a trademark of him.
I don't think it.
Yeah, and perhaps you could speak to what you believe are the effects of how this practice of assassination, decapitation, what kind of effects it's actually had in the here and now, because you mentioned these horrific atrocities that are now extending into the UN area, where UN peacekeeping troops are being fired upon by Israel and threatened by Israel. But you also have the fact that Israel is engaged, and of course the US backing it, is engaged, as you called it, a struggle. They are engaging with Palestinian resistance, Hezbollah, all of these forces in the region that they are engaging in this decapitation. What effect do you believe it's actually had here? Has it moved things forward for them, or it's something else?
Well, there's no question in my mind that the assassination, flagrant, blatant assassination on the inauguration day of the new Iranian president of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, and in the way they did it, and then the credit they took, which is usually the case with Israel, almost as if they're boasting. Were I doing this, I wouldn't let anybody know I'd done it. Everyone might suspect it, but I wouldn't let them know I'd done it. I think that turned the situation with regard to the debate that was going on, a heated debate in Tehran about how they should respond to Israel. I think the hardliners, if you will, I hate to use that term because it's not very descriptive, but I do think those on the side of let's do whatever we have to do, kinetically or otherwise, to Israel, I think they've won now. And they've won over a president who was much more interested in conducting unilaterally new talks with the United States, no Germany, no Perm 5, just the United States, to agree to a new nuclear deal like the JCPOA, but perhaps a little more airtight and a little bit better even. He was very interested in that, and no longer. I think that's out the window now. I think Zarif his vice president, was trying to hold the two sides together, and I think they've gone asunder now. I think maybe even the more progressive side is joined the hardliners, and so you have a unified Tehran now, and a lot of it had to do with that blatant assassination of Haniyeh. And on top of everything else, that was two fingers in the eyes of Washington. I don't know that Joe Biden has eyes that recognize fingers in them, but it was because we were saying, Bill Burns was saying, others in the diplomatic business were saying, we're working, Tehran, we're working on a ceasefire. This guy was absolutely essential to that work, and they killed him. Makes no sense unless you're just bloodthirsty Bibi Netanyahu.
Yes, indeed. And we also have one of the things that I think is most difficult for Israel and the United States right now when it comes to the entire resistance is that it is, and it seems like it has become stronger and more unified over the course of this onslaught that Israel has been engaging in. And one example of this is Yemen. And now we have Ansar Allah has said that a recent use by the United States of these B-2 bombers is a sign of desperation. What do you make of this campaign? Because we have not just the fighting in Gaza, not just the war and the genocide in Gaza that led to Sinwar's death. Not only what's happening in Lebanon, but we also have on all fronts, Iran, of course, this threat of war, but Yemen is getting bombed as we speak. What do you make of the use of these B-2 bombers to strike Yemen, and what effect will it have?
I want to say it's almost the last gasp of the empire. Of course, it's not. There's a lot more left where that came from. But it is indicative of that sort of effort because we cannot stop them. And they keep doing damage. The Port of Eilat, for example, partly, if not largely due to the Houthi action in the Red Sea, is bankrupt. I'm told it's a ghost town now. And a lot of the rest of Israel is bankrupt now, too, for a number of reasons. But the Houthis are tough people. I used to, as a major and a captain in the U.S. Army, at one point I was training a lot of Arab states, but Yemen in particular, and their soldiers. And I got to say that some of the toughest dudes I ever met in my life, and they're proving it right now. They are holding at bay for all practical purposes, like insurance, like the ability to get cargo through the Red Sea, and being very particular about it. If they like you, they don't attack your ship. If they don't like you, or if you're supporting Israel outright, they do attack your ship. And we're hurling everything we can possibly hurl at them, and they keep on coming. That, after having held off little Sparta, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia in condominium, so to speak, coalition that was mercilessly attacking them with our intelligence, our bombs, and our aircraft, and even more complicity than that. So these are tough people. I have to admire them. As a military professional, I have to admire them. They are holding several different entities that want to destroy them at bay, if not, in some respects, defeating them. And in this case, with regard to the Israelis, they're adding to the axis of resistance, as it were, and they're giving them a multi-front war that just might bring Israel to the brink.
Yeah, I mean, in this multi-front war, you have, I mean, the reports about Yayha Sinwar dying with a rifle, an AK or an AK-47 in his hands, fighting with the resistance. So you have still Hamas and the Palestinian resistance as a whole still existing, although there are lots of claims, and I think a lot of people have been talking about, well, what state is it in, given the absolute carnage that has been rained upon Gaza. You also have, as you said, on the Yemen front, you have Ansar Allah really actually bringing heavy economic damage to Israel. But now you also have Hezbollah, while Lebanon is being inflicted upon, especially the southern Lebanon, just absolutely horrific civilian death tolls and loss by Israeli aerial bombing. You also have Hezbollah holding the line very hard. Actually, I don't know if you've seen reports about just every time Israel attempts to invade, they get pushed back dramatically. I think they've lost 4 tanks in the last 24 hours or something of that sort as they try their limited invasion. What do you make of all these developments in the course of what Israel says it is trying to do, which is, of course, decapitate and eliminate the so-called threats of the entire axis of resistance?
Next to Iran, and some people would say Hezbollah is Iran and vice versa. I don't say that. Nasrallah was never Iran's puppet, never. We may have forced Hezbollah on the battlefield to become Iran's puppet now, which is another tragic development, because Hezbollah was actually doing what a lot of organizations that first start out as terrorist organizations do. It was morphing into a political entity. That's what Jamaat Islamiyah did in Southeast Asia. They are now coming in from the forest, if you will, and being forgiven and being incorporated in the political process. That's what the Muslim Brotherhood did, one wing of it anyway. One could say that Erdogan sprang from the Muslim Brotherhood. So that was a tragic development that Israel caused by killing Nasrallah. And now they're going to pay for it, as you just indicated, and I'm hearing they're paying for it dearly. When you parse a battlefield today, especially a battlefield like Israel is on right now, with interior lines, with some of the most sophisticated, if not the most sophisticated for a small country, medical evacuation procedures and surgeons and doctors, both on the battlefield itself and back in Israel, and the minimal time you have to, most often by helicopter or by a fast vehicle, evacuate people. Your count to determine the severity of the combat is more inclined to go to WIA, not KIA. Same thing in Afghanistan with American forces, and in Iraq too, 2003 with American forces. What you do is you produce a lot of amputees and a lot of traumatic brain injury and a lot of really terrible wounds, but you save lives. I can't tell you how many times I have heard a soldier badly wounded or a Marine badly wounded say, "Let me bleed out, let me die," because they're looking down knowing they're going to lose their legs and maybe their arms. So the WIA count is far more important than the KIA count in terms of assessing battlefield success or failure. And I'm hearing the WIA count in Lebanon right now is off the charts, reflecting what you just said. Just as in 1978, just as in 1982, just as in 2006, Israel has overestimated, Bibi Netanyahu has overestimated, Yoav Gallant has overestimated the IDF's capability to take on Hezbollah where they are and how they are right now. And part of that is because they've had such a soft time killing babies and children and dogs and cats and women in Gaza and gotten used to that. And now they're up against some really hardcore fighters who are going to fight them to the death from the caves in the mountains if necessary. They're going to take horrendous casualties.
Yes, that has been something I've been hearing from channels across the axis of resistance, is that, those who are sympathetic, is that Israel has just not been fighting a real war, one where they're, rather than targeting helpless women, children, civilians, now you are fighting forces that may not even have the same capabilities as you, but have will and capabilities to, at the very least, challenge you. And with that will, I mean, and with that capacity, knowledge of land, all of these things comes pretty difficult circumstances. I wanted to ask you, Colonel, since you have been on the inside, you do know the Israeli side a bit from your work, but also even since you've been out from the inside. I want to ask you about the casualty numbers, because, on the Israeli side, because Hezbollah reports them. Hezbollah will say, well, we took out 4 or 5 IDF soldiers, in these engagements with Israel as they try to invade. But overall, in the course of now this multi-front conflict, should we trust what Israel says about how things have gone over the course of this war? Because in the beginning, after October 7, 2023, of course, the big number, right? 1,200, 1,400 Israeli, many of them soldiers, were killed. And then over the course, it got incredibly small, despite the length of this war, the resistance being quite, engaged. And now they're mired with Hezbollah, and it seems like it's very intense fighting. What do you think about Israel's narrative about how the casualties and the losses on their side have gone?
A principal practice of the IDF and of the Israeli government in general in reporting on such things as casualties is lying. It's not lying to them. It's a part of the strategic landscape. You do not let anyone know, if you can prevent it, that, for example, a ballistic missile hit an airfield and destroyed 3 F-35s. You lie. It's the same thing across the board, because what they will tell you is, and I have listened to them make this argument, that's a part of the battle. You have to lie because you can't ever give the enemy the truth. And even if you tell your allies and friends the truth, they will leak it to the enemy invariably through their media or whatever. They're probably right about that. So you never tell the truth. You never show the enemy what his effects have been on you. So they're lying. They're lying all the time. I suspect, well, let's look at what they're not telling about Gaza. Whether you read the Lancet article, a very well-respected medical magazine, or you do what the Pentagon did with its template for urban terrain and try to assess the casualties that Israel has actually inflicted in Gaza on Hamas. It's over 200,000. There's no question in my mind that it's over 200,000. Many of those bodies we will not find because the rubble is so piled and deep upon their bodies, or their bodies are so eviscerated, or both, they will never be able to be counted. They'll just bulldozer over them. But the rate of the template shows the type of terrain, density of the terrain, the population. We have to remember Gaza is not even as big as Greater London. It shows the concrete, the rebar, all the different material, and all the different kinds of buildings and so forth. You put this template down and you say, and it's very accurate. We did it in Afghanistan, we did it in Iraq, we did it everywhere else we've been in modern times. It's very accurate. It predicts how many casualties are there. It's over 200,000 Gazans that they've killed right now. It's poppycock. Hamas doesn't want it to be that high because they feel like it'll disenchant the Gazans in terms of support. I suspect that's happened a long time ago. And Israel doesn't want it that high because then the war crimes have even more credibility and have more weight in the international community. So they're lying. They continue to lie. And they're lying the same way about their own casualties, both wounded and killed, though, as I said, the killed is not nearly as high as the wounded. And the wounded is what to look at in terms of determining what's happening. In addition to that, they're lying about the missiles and what the missiles have done, both from Hezbollah, Houthis, and from Iran. Now, Iran, in its first strike in April, went out of its way to let the United States, and the United States let Saudi Arabia and Jordan and other countries that helped know where the missiles were coming, to their very trajectory and their track, so we could shoot them, most of them, down. But even then, a few got through. But the second wave that came in, many of them got through. Defied Iron Dome, defied our Aegis cruisers and Aegis-like systems, and they will defy everything we've sent over there when it happens again, like THAAD. THAAD is a joke in my eyes. THAAD's not going to do them any good with the few numbers that they have. The theater. It was the Theater High Altitude Air Defense, and then the Missile Defense Agency took it over, and now they call it the Terminal High Altitude Air Defense System. The secret to that really is not the missile itself so much as the radar and the sophistication of the radar. But you can you can swarm that and beat it too. So if another attack comes from Iran and it is predicated upon a more devastating attack by Israel on Iran, whether it's all missiles or aircraft and missiles or all aircraft, and it doesn't matter what the targets are, though some will be more serious than others, of course, then Iran's going to devastate Israel, overwhelm everything and devastate Israel. And it will be the first time that in most of those Jewish Israelis' lives that they have seen this kind of devastation. I predict the population of Israel will go down by 2 million within 6 weeks. It's already gone down by 1 million. And there are people who are leaving. Putin reached out. You know, the latest great wave of immigrants was Russians. Putin reached out and said, come back and we'll make life good for you. You were a brain drain. You're engineers, scientists, and other people. Come back to Russia. We'll welcome you. We'll get you good jobs and everything else. There are some people going to take him up on that.
Yeah.
It's not safe anymore. It is not a safe haven anymore.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyHydeFong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.